The story of Alexander Yuvchenko, survivor of the Chernobyl disaster. Alexander Yuvchenko was born in 1962 and became a nuclear engineer, enthusiastic about his profession. At that time, working at a nuclear power plant was considered prestigious in the Soviet Union. He chose the Chernobyl nuclear power plant because it was one of the best plants in the country, with good pay and a pleasant city to live in Pripyat. Yuvchenko did an internship there while he was a student and decided to stay. By April 1986 he was only 24 years old and already had experience working with reactors, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened on the night of April 26th. That night Yuvchenko was on the night shift. When he arrived at work, he learned that a safety test scheduled for that day had been moved to the evening. Reactor No. 4 had already been shut down, and his task was simply to monitor the cooling process, a routine job that promised no complications. He thought the night would be quiet and he would be able to get some rest. Yuvchenko was in his office discussing a request for paint with a colleague, and reviewing documents when everything changed. First, there was a dull thud, as if something heavy had fallen, and the entire block shook. 2 or 3 seconds later, there was a powerful explosion. The office doors flew open, and thick dust mixed with steam hung in the air. It was like an old building being demolished. Clouds of dust, shaking, falling objects. The lights went out, and everything around them began to collapse. Yuvchenko and his colleague rushed to find shelter. They ran into a transport corridor with a low ceiling and a narrow passageway. They stood there while everything around them fell and shook. At that moment, Yuvchenko thought that perhaps a war had begun, so unexpected and destructive was the chaos. He could not imagine that the explosion was related to the reactor. Their training emphasized that the reactors were safe and the protection systems were reliable. They had undergone training for fires and other accidents, but no one had prepared them for such a scenario. The instructions stated that pressing the emergency stop button, as his friend Leonid Topchunov had done in the control room, should shut down the reactor by lowering the rods. But that did not happen. People could make mistakes, but the systems were supposed to compensate for those mistakes. That was what they had been taught. After the explosion, Yuvchenko returned to the office and tried to call the control room of reactor number 4 to find out what had happened. The line was dead. Suddenly the phone rang from control room number 3. He was ordered to bring a stretcher. He grabbed it and ran. At the entrance to control room number 4 he met a friend who was closer to the epicenter of the explosion. Yuvchenko did not recognize him at first. His clothes were black with soot. His face was disfigured by burns from boiling water. Only by his voice did he realize who it was. His friend said they needed to go to the site of the explosion, where others were injured. While the others helped the injured man, Yuvchenko grabbed a flashlight and rushed to find the operator who had been working near the huge cooling liquid tanks. What he saw was horrific. Instead of the familiar place, there was chaos and destruction. The injured operator had managed to crawl away. He was wet, dirty, badly burned by steam, and shaking in shock. He pointed in the direction where their colleague, Valery Kodymchuk, should have been, right at the epicenter. But there was nothing in that direction. Just emptiness and ruins. Yuvchenko saw Yuri Trigub, whom Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov had sent to manually activate the high-pressure emergency system for supplying cooling water. Realizing that Trigub could not do it alone, Yuvchenko decided to help. He told the injured man where to go for help and went with Trigub. They tried to reach the taps to turn on the water. The cooling fluid tanks were in a room not far from the reactor. The first entrance was blocked by collapsed walls, so they went down a couple of floors to another door. There, the water was knee-deep. The door did not open completely, but through the crack they saw the ruins. Huge tanks had been torn apart, only the wall and the door remained, behind which was an open space. To better understand the scale, they went outside. The sight was nightmarish. Everything that could be destroyed had been destroyed. The cooling system had completely disappeared. The right side of the reactor hall had collapsed, and fragments of pipes hung from the left. It was then that Yuvchenko realized that Kodymchuk was dead. The place where he had been standing had been reduced to ruins. The turbines had survived, but around them was a complete collapse. Kodymchuk was probably buried under the rubble. From that spot Yuvchenko saw something indescribable. A huge beam of light projected upward from the reactor into infinity. It was laser light, bluish-white, caused by the ionization of the air. It was beautiful but deadly radiation of gamma rays, neutrons, and everything else. Yuvchenko stared at it for a few seconds, and if he had lingered for a minute, he would have died on the spot. Tragub grabbed him and dragged him around the corner, saving his life. Tragub was older and more experienced. Then they headed back to Control Room No. 4 on the way. They met 3 workers whom Dyatlov had sent to manually lower the rods into the reactor hall. Tragub ran to report, and Yuvchenko went with the 3 to help. He warned them that it was pointless, the reactor hall was gone, and so were the rods. But they insisted, saying they had to check from the upper level. Yuvchenko knew how dangerous it was, but he went. They climbed onto the ledge, where there was little room. Yuvchenko was the last to arrive and stayed at the door holding it open while the others went in with a flashlight. He heard their reactions. The hall looked like a volcanic crater. Nothing could be done. They came out. The 3 died shortly after the wall and door saved Yuvchenko, but he still received a high dose while holding the door. It was the worst moment, the realization that nothing more could be done, the feeling of helplessness. Around 3 a.m., an hour and a half after the explosion, Yuvchenko began to feel nauseous. He knew it was a symptom of radiation exposure, but tried to convince himself that he had eaten something bad. Half an hour after the explosion, he met a man with a dosimeter. He was fully protected, and the device was off the charts. The dose was enormous, but exactly how much was unknown. Then ulcers appeared from radiation burns, many burns. Only after a couple of months did it become clear that he could survive. His body began to function on its own, but he was on constant morphine. His wife Natasha said that he had lost a lot of weight, looked like he was dying, spoke slowly and quietly but remained clear-headed. Yuvchenko survived, thanks to proper treatment and his youth and strength. But the consequences remained: constant skin grafts, ulcers. He received 2 medals for his actions that night and 10 years later, but all the survivors received the second one. In Russia, he tries not to talk about it. There is a stigma. His neighbors don't know. He returned to Chernobyl once in 2000 when the station was being closed, standing on reactor number 3. A copy of reactor number 4. He felt weakness in his knees. Yuvchenko is not against nuclear energy, as long as safety comes first above finances and everything else. If planning an operation prioritize safety, everything will be fine. This story is based on the memories of Alexander Yuvchenko himself, who survived against all odds, and told the story of that night so that the world would remember the price of mistakes. His words are a reminder of the human factor and the tragedy that changed the world. Between 1986 and 1988, he underwent treatment and rehabilitation battling the effects of radiation exposure. Unfortunately, Alexander Yuvchenko died 11th of November in 2008, when he was just 47 years, but the history will remember him as a hero. This is not a story of heroes from books or movies, but a real-life tale of survival in chaos where technology failed and people tried to save what they could.